dressed to kill. The rain, the museum, the stranger, the glove, the glasses, the taxi, the kiss, the note, the elevator, the ring, the razor, dressed to kill. The street, the stockings, the camera, the appointment, the shower, the razor. Brian De Palma, the master of the macabre, invites you to a showing of the latest fashion in murder. No motion picture ever exposed so many of your private fears. Dressed to Kill. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent. The rain, the museum, the stranger, the glove, the glasses, the taxi.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we have a special guest joining us for the first time. It's Aaron Hudson from the podcast That Movie Is Fine. And he's here to talk to us about Dressed to Kill from 1980. That Movie Is Fine is also available on the Pop Culture Entertainment Network, so give it a listen. Aaron, welcome and tell us about yourself in 12 seconds or less.
I'm Aaron. I'm a creative. I do have a podcast called That Movie Is Fine, and I host movies and talk a lot about movies. Movies are my drug of choice. That is my 12-second thing.
Well, we're talking about Dressed to Kill from 1980. It was directed by Brian De Palma and written by him as well. Produced by George Litto for Cinema 77 Filmgroup and distributed by Filmways, with Samuel Z. Arkoff receiving an executive producer credit.
Dressed to Kill stars Michael Caine as Dr. Robert Elliott, Angie Dickinson as Kate Miller, Nancy Allen as Liz Blake, Keith Gordon as Peter Miller, Dennis Franz as Detective Marino, David Margulies as Dr. Levy, Susanna Clemm as Betty Luce, Ken Baker as Warren Lockman, Brandon Maggart as Cleveland Sam, Anneka Di Lorenzo as Nurse, Bill Randolph as Cabbie, Mary Davenport as the woman in the restaurant, and an uncredited William Finley as the voice of Bobbi.
What we always do is we just talk about what happens in the movies, and the first thing we see is a shower scene. It's Angie Dickinson's body double taking a movie shower where she just gets wet without actually washing anything.
You know, like you said, she has a body double there for the lower half. She was told, hey, it's going to be kind of classy. And then the guy came up and was like, we're doing beaver shots today. I don't know if you heard that bit, but she was like, oh, okay. So she realized, the body double is going to be more than just diffused shower shots.
No, it was pretty explicit.
It is, yeah.
She does start masturbating in the shower. She's watching her husband shave and he's ignoring her, but somehow this turns her on. She's surprised by a fully dressed intruder appearing right behind her in the shower.
As anyone would be.
Oh, yeah, I would be. That's even worse than a spider. He covers her mouth and he starts to violate her, which she may or may not be into. I found it hard to tell.
I've known women whose favorite scene in Evil Dead is the tree scene.
Oh, God.
So... you never know. Angie Dickinson is maybe tired of living a bit of a boring housewife life, and that's kind of what we do find out.
Yeah. Her husband kind of looks at her, at what's happening, but he doesn't react. He turns away, and then the scene just sort of fades to mist.
And takes us into a full-on sex scene.
But a really boring one.
Not a very graphic one, no, but...
It's not graphic, and it's obvious that the woman, Angie Dickinson here, is missing the days of when John Wayne was her lover in Rio Bravo. She is not into this at all.
Nope, it's boring married sex.
It is boring married sex, and she is done with it.
And her husband finishes and just hops off.
Next we see she's speaking with her son, Peter, and he's building some sort of a big calculator.
Yeah, it's a room-sized calculator.
It's an old-school computer. That's De Palma inserting himself in the movie. He used to make those when he was in high school.
Really?
And so it's even named the Peter because that's what he named his computer. when he was, messing around with that stuff as a younger lad. So it's the classic author inserting themselves as a character in the movie. In this case, young computer geek Brian De Palma.
Wow.
I'm sorry for that threw you off. I just always thought that was interesting that Brian De Palma made computers as a young lad.
And so Kate tells him to have fun working on his Peter.
We didn't mention the part that he declined to go to the museum with her. That was the whole point of her being there. It becomes important later, so thought I'd bring it up.
It is an important detail. Who knows what would have happened in this movie if she would have brought Peter along for the ride. Much different movie.
So now Kate is on her way to the museum. She exits a cab and calls on Dr. Elliott, who's played by Michael Caine.
Sir Michael Caine.
Was he Sir then?
He's Sir now.
I know he's Sir now, but I don't think he was Sir then. He buzzes her in and he pours a couple of cups of tea, and she immediately starts talking about her mother.
Well, that's what psychotherapy is for, I think.
Mothers.
Her mother wants to visit for Kate's birthday as a surprise, but Kate doesn't really want that.
Yeah, it's her present. It's neither a surprise nor a present.
Isn't that such a mother thing, though? Like, they think it's not only a surprise, but like, I'm gifting you with my presence, young child, and then so I can come in and tell you why your house needs to be rearranged and your marriage needs work, and I'll fix that for you. That's just a mother for you. The gift that keeps on giving.
So next, Dr. Elliott asks about her husband, Mike, and she says that everything's fine except that he gave her one of his wham bang specials this morning.
Elliott uses some psychiatrist talk at her. It makes her mad, but Dr. Elliott tells her to redirect her anger towards her husband because it's his fault. Then Kate asks if Dr. Elliott finds her attractive, and he does. She asks if he wants to sleep with her. He consults his image in the mirror before answering. Yes, he does. But he's not going to because she's not worth ruining his marriage and career over.
It's an interesting little exchange there because there is lots of stories of therapists and their patients falling in love with each other, and it happens. Obviously, it comes into play major in this movie, but also you mentioned the mirror shot. There's the whole thing of duality running throughout this entire thing with the cinematography and the blocking in certain shots and mirror shots and that sort of thing.
Split screens.
Yeah, the split screen.
So now we come to the museum scene. This is such a long scene. There's no dialogue. Do you think it's just De Palma showing off the tracking shots? Is that something that I read?
This is probably the most famous scene in the movie. If you get into the like cinemaphile, if you look at people's like, oh, these are my top 10 De Palma set pieces. A lot of talk about this museum scene, and it is long. But De Palma, if you watch his other flicks, he does know how to press your patience. And in this case, it's for a purpose. He's giving you the geography of the museum. This isn't the important thing of setting up a set piece like this, is you as the audience also needs to know where things are at. So then when the game really starts, the cat and mouse kind of chase and the set piece actually kicks into motion, you as the audience member are never confused. You're never kind of unaware of where they're at and where they're moving to and from. So it's all just a big chess piece that he's playing. And it is showing off, don't get me wrong. He's a visual master as far as those big tracking shots and, a lot of times going against the idea of traditional, cut back and forth from a 2-shot to a 1-shot. He likes moving cameras and he likes wide angles and really giving you an idea of where you're at, not just the character, but you as the vicarious point of view.
So in the scene, Kate is hanging out on a bench and looking around. She's writing a grocery list on a calendar, and a man sits next to her. They smile in acknowledgement of each other, and Kate starts to look a little uncomfortable. She takes off her gloves, revealing her massive diamond. And the man immediately gets up and leaves. Kate looks down at her hand and realizes the terrible mistake she's made. And then she follows him without really following him. She loses sight and finds him waiting for her. She walks past. The whole thing is a little dramatic, and the score is just going crazy during the whole scene.
Yeah, it keeps building and building.
The Pino Donaggio score really does build, and that's another thing De Palma kind of steals from Hitchcock, is the importance of sound in a different way. That came from a few years earlier. He was working on a movie with Paul Hirsch, who was his editor for a big chunk of his movies. And Paul Hirsch you guys did Sisters, right? You already talked about Sisters?
We're going to.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, when you get into Sisters, you can get into the Hitchcock influence on that one too. But Paul Hirsch was watching Psycho on TV, and it was that simple scene where she's in the car and she's driving and it's rainy, and he was noticing how tense it was, yet the camera was very basic. It was just like a wide shot and then a close up. And he turned off the sound. He turned it back up. And he was just like, my God, it's the music. The music building is what gives you the heebie-jeebies more than anything. And so he showed De Palma this. And De Palma was like, yeah, you're right. This is important. The music. And the music is over dramatic in this scene. Yeah. But once again, it's building on you, like pressing. How much can the audience take? The boring stuff happens. There's this guy. And the music starts kicking in more and more and more. How much can you not only take, not just the character, but you as a viewer, pressing your buttons, whether you realize it or not? Mm-hmm. Like you're like, do you like this? Is it just visual jerking off, kind of a thing? Or is there actually like something here? And it is a long scene. It's a long scene. I know it, but it's the sound mix. I don't know if you guys noticed the sound mix is so specific too in that stuff. Because it's not just like throwing in everything in there. It's like very specific, like the writing on the pad is so loud at a certain point. The kids making noise over here, that becomes the loud focal point. It's focusing on these little moments in that museum with her and what's going on around her. And not just everything at once. It's pinpointing it. It's just all this subtle building up. And that music crescendoing like that, it's wild.
I'm going to have to watch it again now because I did not notice that.
Well, I felt it was like building and building, but then nothing, the payoff wasn't there.
I mean, I think the payoff was she had her first orgasm in a long, long time.
But that's all later.
That ultimately, but it's all the game. It's the cat and mouse game.
With the glove.
Yeah.
I don't understand the glove thing because she drops it, he picks it up, and then he puts it on for some reason to give it back to her.
But he assaults her first, though. He just grabs her from behind, some stranger with a glove. That is not how you pick up a woman in a museum.
It is not how you pick up a woman, but we also know that she might be into this a little bit from an earlier scene. She has a little bit of a non-consent kind of thing in her kink wheelhouse.
He doesn't know that.
He doesn't, so he's just being a douchebag.
But I guess you try it enough times, it's going to work at least once.
Well, I mean, we know we'll get to this later, this guy probably gets around a little bit.
So she's chasing him. After the glove incident where he grabs her, she runs away from him, and now he's chasing her. And so it's a little back and forth as they go around the museum until eventually he leads her outside.
She goes outside and notices that he's sitting in a cab. He's kind of waving the glove at her from inside the
Toreador door.
Yeah. Did you guys notice in the pan from the museum down over to the cab?
Yep.
You noticed the... Okay.
Yeah, there's someone there.
Yeah, there is someone there. A lot of people missed that on their first watch.
I caught it. Yeah, well, I was watching it on my phone and I just paused it. And
on your phone, just like Scorsese intended for all film to be seen.
Yes, exactly. On a 3-inch screen. Yep.
So she goes to the cab and starts to apologize, but before she can get a few words out, he grabs her and drags her into the car.
Before she saw him, she takes the glove that she has remaining and she just throws it on the steps. And then she goes to the cab.
That's right. As she's being pulled in, someone picks that glove up.
Yeah, it's that someone that we weren't maybe supposed to see, but we did see. We noticed.
It's supposed to feel off, I think. Even if you notice them or not, it's supposed to feel like that was kind of creepy,
Yeah, it doesn't look like something is discordant there. So the cab ride turns X-rated. The mystery man slips off Kate's panties, and the scandalized driver is kind of watching from the rearview mirror, and then she gets a load of him watching. Then he turns the mirror away, so he's not.
I don't think he was that scandalized.
Well, is he titillated? He seems shocked. We'll put it that way. And yeah, like you said, Kate finally gets what her husband couldn't give her that morning. She has an O, and the horn blares. That's what happens when you have sex in a car.
So the cab eventually stops, and the man escorts Kate out of the cab, and they go up to his apartment. Time goes by, sun sets, and now it's 9:01 p.m. She gets out of bed and starts to get dressed.
Yeah, she's got to find all her clothes, and accessories are everywhere. The first split scene that we see, that at least the one that I noticed, was in the museum when she realized she lost her glove, and she starts thinking where. And then she remembers that the guy had it on his hand when he grabbed her. That's when she started to go after him again. Maybe she wanted the glove, maybe she wanted him, maybe both. But now there's another split screen coming up. When she gets dressed, she can't find her panties.
Her day just keeps getting worse, really, like at this point.
Well, she's very careless with her belongings.
She is. She's very careless in general, it seems.
Because the split screen reminds her that, oh yeah, they dropped on the floor of the cab when the sex was happening.
So there's nothing she can do about that, obviously. So she starts to leave, but then turns around and goes to the phone and she calls home.
Why would she do that? Guilt?
Probably, yeah.
But then she doesn't say anything. Her husband answers, gets angry when no one says anything, and then she just slams the phone down.
And then she remembers she left her underwear in the cab.
Yeah, that's the point.
So since she's at this man's desk, and she starts looking through his drawers.
Snooping.
She finds a piece of the man's identification, so now she knows his name and when his gym membership expires.
It's Warren Lockman.
What else does she find, though? I feel like there's more to this.
Well, she finds some note paper first. She wants to leave a note, and it's like half romantic, half casual. Like, I enjoyed our evening. She can't quite get the words right because it sounds stupid no matter what she writes. That becomes a moot point pretty soon.
And it's purposeful because we're supposed to, as an audience, kind of relax a little bit. All the heightened tension built up to this sex scene. Now it's kind of just this boring thing. And she's figuring out, where's my stuff? I'm going to write a note. I don't know what to write. It's just, it's relaxing you, whether you realize it or not.
But that relaxing is very short-lived because another piece of paper reveals that this man has contracted a quote, unquote, venereal disease.
It kind of looks like congratulations, you have VD.
It is. It's like when your kid gets on the honor roll, it's like, here's your congratulations. You did it.
And not only that, there's a whole list of other people that share this disease with him, whether he's the giver or the beneficiary. I don't know. He's on a list, and there's many more names.
As I said, this fella, I feel, has gotten around a little bit too, and this is the reveal of that. And it's a red herring, which is funny.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. She has VD now.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to matter for long.
Yeah, but Kate is now very angry because up until now, this had been a perfect evening. So she storms out and heads to the elevator.
We see somebody there, though, watching her that she doesn't see.
Yeah.
The person watching her from the stairwell is the woman in black, blonde woman with the black trench coat and the sunglasses. She hides before she gets seen.
On the elevator, she realizes that she left her wedding ring on the nightstand.
Another split screen?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, she's a ditz.
Yeah, I wonder if she'd remember anything if it wasn't for the split screens. So she tries to go back up to the 7th floor, but that's
not what elevators do. You can't just be going down and then hit the up button.
Yeah, it's going down. So
you go down.
She winds up stopping on 5, and a woman and her creepy daughter enter the elevator.
This poor kid.
She does not stop staring at her the whole time.
Yeah.
And her mom's like, stop doing that. But she's gonna stare. But then Angie Dickinson, or Kate, looks so guilty here. She's frantic about her ring. She's frantic about having
her day's getting worse and worse.
Syphilis or whatever.
It's gone from this great, I finally got some, a decent schlonking in my life to every little thing is not going her way. And once again, it's building up suspense, but not in the way that it pays off. It's just making you slowly feel uneasy.
Mm-hmm.
Things are not going well for this woman.
So the elevator makes its way down to the ground floor, and the woman and her daughter leave. And now Kate is free to push the button to bring the elevator back up to the 7th floor where she wants to go. When she reaches 7, the door opens to reveal the woman with the sunglasses, and she's got a razor.
Yeah, she has a new accessory. And the woman wastes no time. She backs her into the elevator and starts slashing.
And once again, you have the mirror up in the corner of the elevator that makes it a little extra creepy and adds a little duality to it all again.
Why is she so passive in this scene? Just comparing it to Psycho, I think Janet Leigh in Psycho and the scene where Kate is killed, it just seems like she's just posing and waiting for the blows rather than trying to avoid them or fight back. I just thought it was odd that she was so passive in this scene.
I'd say there's a lot of posing in Psycho, too.
You think so?
It's almost like a series of still shots with her doing different poses as the cuts away to.
It's certainly, if obviously you got it right away that this is, a play on Psycho.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know if you've watched any De Palma movies, specifically from this period, he watches Hitchcock movies, the way most fellas watch Pornhub on their phones. And it's him doing the shower scene in an elevator, which is interesting, I think.
You're just as trapped.
You're just as trapped. I think in some ways the woman and her child almost have made her more at ease because it's like, okay, it's just a woman and her child. They're a little creepy, but and so then she sees another person. It takes her a second to realize this is a real danger, not just a creepy looking person.
He's got the razor raised up. Should be fight or flight by that point.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot of fight.
I guess freeze is also the other reaction.
Yeah.
So now we meet the character of Liz Blake, played by Nancy Allen, and she is waiting for the elevator, and she's with a man, and they're making small talk about stocks. While they wait, the elevator door opens, and the man looks in, and he's gone. He's not going to stick around there.
He bails right away. This is a stand-up fella right there.
And she's watching him run away, so she hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah.
And she's kind of wondering what his problem is, and then she starts to enter the elevator and stops short when she sees bloody Kate on the floor. And Kate reaches up her hand toward Liz.
Very dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it would look like Janet Leigh pulling down the shower curtain.
Oh, yeah.
Liz reaches down and almost to take her hand and sees that in the reflection that there is somebody else on the elevator. And this someone is inching the razor toward Liz's outstretched hand. It seems to take a while because this is almost all done in kind of a slow motion.
I guess that heightens attention too.
Mm-hmm.
Gives you time to think about it.
And then this someone in the elevator realizes that she's been spotted and drops the razor as the elevator doors close.
And Liz picks it up and then starts waving it around.
This is one of those moments in movies where what is this idiot doing? You know, you're doing the exact opposite of what you're supposed to, but that's all by design because that's how you're supposed to feel. Playing you like the piano because, I would never pick up the knife. What are you doing? It's just pure cinema 101 of just make a character do something that you shouldn't do in this moment. Of course, it leads to her whole journey as well.
She turns around and there's the cleaning lady sees her holding a bloody razor. The cleaning lady starts screaming. Instead of dropping it, she sort of runs at her, almost brandishing it, saying, "It wasn't me. Call the police. Call the police." And then the cleaning lady locks herself in her room. Smart woman. She screams for her to call the police and then runs down to the lobby, still screaming, still holding the razor. Not screaming, but just saying, "Call the police. Someone's been killed." The camera goes by the elevator and we see Kate's hand, bloody, keeping the elevator from closing. It's slamming closed on her.
We assume it's Kate's hand.
Why would you assume elsewise?
It's New York.
That elevator's full of dead bodies.
So now it's evening and we're back with Dr. Elliott and he's checking his messages. He listened to a couple, nothing really important until he gets a message from Bobbi. And she explains that she has to call because Dr. Elliott refuses to see her. And also says that she is a woman trapped in a man's body and she's borrowed his razor.
She also mentions that since Dr. Elliott won't sign the papers authorizing her sex reassignment surgery, she found a new doctor who's going to do that, and that's Dr. Levy. Then she tells Elliott not what she did. I don't think she says that right away, but he's going to find out what she did in tomorrow's news. And then confesses that some blonde bitch saw her, but Bobby's going to get her. And if Dr. Elliott says anything to Dr. Levy to ruin the chance of her getting that surgery, she's going to be a bad girl again. Now, she doesn't sound particularly feminine. And we know it's a man transitioning to a woman, but it's a very gruff, kind of unaccented, deep man's voice.
So then Dr. Elliott checks his drawer and finds his fancy razor is indeed gone. The next message that plays on Dr. Elliott's machine is from Detective Marino from the 13th Precinct, and he says that one of Dr. Elliott's patients, Kate Miller, has been killed. And he's requesting that Dr. Elliott come down to the precinct to answer some questions.
We get to the police station, and Liz is there looking at mugshots. From a window looking in on her, the cleaning lady IDs her as the nut with the razor from the hotel. And then Dr. Elliott arrives at NYPD Blue to talk to Marino, who's played by Dennis Franz, who's like famously a cop in just about everything he does.
I mean, he's in several De Palma movies, but yeah, he exudes like that like New York cop energy.
Mm-hmm.
The way he phrases things. He's got the chewing gum thing going on that just seems kind of arrogant, but like he's not an asshole in this. He's doing his job.
No,
but like he just exudes that New York cop like to a T.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Dr. Elliott comes in now and walks right up to Marino and seems to know who he is.
I think it's just the look. He looks like the guy that left that message.
And then Dr. Elliott introduces himself and Marino tells him to take a seat and he'll be with him in just a minute.
He does take a seat. He sits next to Peter, who's also there for some reason. He looks miserable. He blames himself for his mom being killed. And, he's got a point.
He was supposed to go with her.
She wouldn't have bonked that guy in the cab if he was there. I mean, I think probably not. She might have sent him home on the bus or something. But
she was a big bad mama.
Yeah, she was a big bad mama. She was. Dr. Elliott tries to do the shrink thing with Peter and console him a bit, but he can't. But he does give him his card saying, come talk to me. We'll see what we can do. But then he gets called in to talk to Marino.
And then Peter, being the genius that he is, rigs up some sort of a listening device. It's like the head of a stethoscope maybe, and it's rigged to a cassette recorder.
And he's got an earbud.
And he's got earbuds, so he is able to listen in on the conversation on the next room.
In all these scenes in the police precinct, lots of split diopter shots. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but you would probably it's in the Palma fetishizes this attachment, but basically it's a attachment on a lens that allows you to have two completely different focal points.
Oh, so you're not rack focusing.
So
here,
yeah, exactly. So I could have a shot of where traditionally I'd have you in focus and you out of focus. It allows it to where you're in focus and it's very blurry behind you. And as I bump your mic, and then it's still, you'll see kind of almost a weird fuzz in the middle. And then you're in focus and the back and behind you's out of focus. And it's kind of goes along with that split screen thing. Like De Palma obviously has a thing about that, you know, not just in literal split screen, but in the camera angles and such.
Right.
And it's used a lot in this movie.
That shot that you were talking about with the stopwatch when he's timing people coming in.
Yeah. That's one of those shots.
Screen. I'm like, no, that's not a split screen.
Yeah, that's not a split screen. That's a split diopter.
Oh, okay.
And it's used a lot more than you think. Sometimes directors try and hide that they're using it. Like, for instance, there's one in Pulp Fiction when Bruce Willis is running. There's that whole, the whole fight scene and they're running and they end up getting hit by cars and all that. I don't know if you remember how well you remember Pulp Fiction, but there's a scene where he's on a wall and Ving Rhames is coming after him and it's a split diopter shot. So Bruce is in focus and so is Ving, but he kind of uses the edge of the building to disguise that he's using one, just angling it like that. But De Palma doesn't give a shit. He's just like, I'll use that thing whenever I can and it will be very apparent. But it's in pretty much all his movies.
That's pretty much how he always frames the shots.
Split screen is just him, in a lot of ways, speed up the energy of a movie, which I know we're talking about how he can slow things down. But it's like instead of just a traditional cutting back and forth constantly, it's like, okay, I'll find ways to do more storytelling in one single frame at once. So that way I don't have to keep cutting back and forth.
Yeah, there's a scene coming up where that gets really annoying too. What Peter hears is, unfortunately for him, he hears that Marino knows all about what happened. And he tells Elliott that Kate was killed after spending the afternoon carnally with a guy. And then he points at Liz, who we can see through one of the windows, and says that girl saw the killer, who was a woman. And that surprises Elliott. Marino wants to know if Kate mentioned anything at their session or if she left with somebody, if there's someone there collecting her when she left. But Elliott can't answer those questions. And then Marino, I thought this was kind of a rude question, but he asked if maybe Kate was looking to get murdered, like anybody would want that, or was she suicidal? And Elliott doesn't really believe that. And then lastly, Marino wonders if any of Elliott's weirdo patients followed her. Elliott attempts to argue the semantics. We don't call them weirdos. It's not a professional diagnosis. But I guess the answer is no. There wasn't anybody there.
So at this point, Peter's stepdad, Mike, comes to gather him. And Marino briefly goes out from his office to, I guess, say goodbye.
Well, they probably will help you come in for more questions or let you know if we find anything.
Very social goodbye, but...
No, but it's like police business.
Yeah. So while Marino was out of the office, Dr. Elliott notices a folder on the desk with Elizabeth Blake's full name and address on it.
How convenient.
And then Marino comes back in to close out the scene.
Yeah, he wants Elliott's appointment book because he wants to know who else was there that day, but that violates patient confidentiality and he's not going to comply with that.
So next we're back with Elliott in his office and he's trying to call Liz.
Yeah, I think he's calling her service. That's what I figured out because he doesn't ask for her explicitly.
He just leaves a message that he'd like to see her.
Yeah, she should call him.
And then we go back to the precinct and Marino was now questioning Liz.
He wants to know why, explicitly, she was there at the hotel. She's trying to deflect the question, saying that she was visiting a friend who, by the way, was married. And yeah, they did it. And Marino jokes that a lot of afternoon delight going on at this apartment complex. But then he spells it out bluntly. He knows she's a whore. She's a high-priced one, but doesn't change the fact that she's a whore. And he wants to know...
Sex work is work, okay?
Yeah, I know. This was...
Nancy Allen can do whatever she wants.
Well, what he wants is to find out the name of her John, the guy that she was there with. because he's the only witness who can prove that she wasn't holding the razor because she just killed that woman. He saw her dead. He can vouch for her. So if Liz knows what's good for her, she's going to give up the name. And he gives her 48 hours to do that or else, but she doesn't know his name.
So next we find ourselves by the river, and Liz is on a payphone, and she's trying to get info on Ted, which is the name she has for this particular John.
If that's his real name.
And she explains that he was so good that she just has to see him again. But her service isn't buying this.
They see right through that bullshit.
Yeah. Does anybody believe that?
Yeah, come on.
Oh, I'm so into you.
So we cut away and we're back with Peter, and he's doing some reconnaissance. He's gone to Dr. Elliott's office, and he's timing how long it takes people to exit.
There's one of those shots as we were talking about.
Yeah. Is he timing their appointment length? Because they're really short. Like he said, the shortest one was 8 seconds.
He's timing how long it takes them to exit the doorway and through the gate.
And get out of the frame. Okay.
Yeah.
So he takes his information home and begins to invent something.
Yeah, he has all the schematics all drawn out, and he's got a big future in inventing things. We see Liz walking home, and from a distance, she's being observed by a blonde woman.
Now we're back with Peter, and he's returning to Dr. Elliott's office, and he rigs up a time-lapse camera using the information he gathered. And
there's where all those seconds come into play. How quickly does the shutter need to go to gather information that he needs?
And then we go inside where Dr. Elliott is listening to another message from Bobbi. And then we split the screen, and we're at Liz's home as well, and she's on the phone with her stockbroker.
I mean, who doesn't want a good John who gives you great, inside stock tips? Like not only is she getting paid to sleep with this man, but, she's going to make some more money down the line potentially off this guy.
It's a big investment. She's also on another phone. She's talking to her service. She needs a date that will pay enough for her to buy these stock. So she's doing the one phone. You can't do that on cell phones really, but she puts one phone against her chest while she talks to on the other phone and then switches.
Yeah.
Pretending that she's talking to her mother when the service is on because she wants to give her imaginary mother some imaginary surgery.
So we're still split screen, and on Dr. Elliott's side of the screen, he's turning on some late night Donahue.
That was a morning show as far as I recall.
Yeah, I don't remember that ever being on.
But maybe they moved it tonight because of the controversial subject matter.
Yep, the subject of this episode is transsexuals.
Wow, how very topical.
And Liz turns on the same program. And there are a lot of mirrors in both places.
Lots of mirrors and reflections. The split stuff is going on. That interview is very important because that was a real interview, obviously, that Palma watched that gave him some inspiration on what became this movie, for better or worse.
I think it's also important just that Donahue is treating this woman like a real person. Like, he's not treating her like a condition or an oddity. He's talking to her like, we know you're a woman now. This was your life as a man. Tell your story. And I think that was kind of avant-garde for the 80s.
This is
forward thinking.
That interview happened in like 79 or whatever for that time period, because the clips we see, they talk about, you had a family, you had kids, you had this whole life, you were in the military. Mm-hmm. Now this is you, and it's not demonizing this person whatsoever.
Right. And I think whatever else you can say about how this movie treated the subject of transsexuals, this is kind of evidence that De Palma's at least trying to not make it some weirdo is killing people because it's really a man trapped in a woman's body. So I guess I got to give him a little credit for that.
Yeah, you have to. We were talking about this with me and Jeff, holding older movies to modern morals and modern information, because the whole point of humans is hopefully we evolve and get better and are better understanding of certain things. Because it's a dangerous alley to go down. Mm-hmm. You don't want to demonize an entire culture of people. And so, yes, like you said, the hope is that this is trying to say these people aren't the issue. This one person is the issue.
Right.
This person's sick in the head and they're sick in the head no matter what they are.
So while Liz had been playing phone tag with herself, she did make a date with somebody to cover her not having to sell her stocks. And now it's time for her to go on that date. And she pays a call on the Cleveland Sam in room 331 because it's her job. And he feels he's hit the jackpot.
He doesn't even know why she's there. I don't know what he was expecting.
So again, time passes, and she's now leaving Cleveland in 3:31. And we see that a woman is watching Liz through binoculars.
And then Liz sees that she's being watched. She sees the person across the street. That person sees her. Liz gets in a cab, and the person watching her gets in the back of another car. Once she realizes she's being followed, she asks the cabbie for help in losing her tail. That is just so typical of cabbies. They're
always being asked this, I feel like.
They're so equipped for this. They're ready.
Well, what is her line of dialogue? Like, what's your thought on like running red lights or something like that?
Yeah.
What's the going rate?
Yeah, that's what it is, yeah.
So the cabbie tries to shake this woman, but he's not very successful. In fact, he's unsuccessful.
Even running the red light, it didn't work.
But he somehow gets her to agree to let him take her out to dinner to make up for it. She says, sure, call me, and I'm sure that'll happen.
Did they even exchange numbers during this whole traumatic chase scene? She wanted to be taken home first, but instead she changes her mind and asks to be dropped at Columbus Circle. She's going to take the subway home. She's going to lose the tail that way. He drops her off, asks for the date, like you said. And then when he sees in his rearview mirror the blonde woman coming up, he times it just right where he swings open his door and he decks her. She's down.
He does say, excuse me. And Liz is taking the subway back to her place on Nassau Street.
Yep, that was an uneventful ride that happened off screen.
She makes it back to her building and sees a blonde woman in sunglasses standing in front.
Wow, how'd she get there so fast? This confused me, I have to confess. I didn't get that this was two different locations and she actually did go in the subway and ride back to her place, but Jeff made me go back and watch it. So yeah, now I get it.
So Liz runs back down to the subway and she is accosted by a gang who I guess wasn't down there a minute ago when she had been down there before.
I think she didn't want to be alone, and they were the only other people on the platform.
Yeah.
So she knows she's being followed because before she went down, there was some commotion in the street, and she turns around to look at it, and when she does, she sees that the woman is also there.
Yeah.
And the woman sees her going down to the subway. So that commotion means that they notice each other, and now she knows she's being followed by the woman in black. So she goes to the only other group of people on the subway. It's some gang guys that's listening to, I'm doing air quotes here, rap music.
Yeah, they got their little boombox thing.
Oh my God, that music is so egregious. It's almost like it wants to be Blondie, but then it sort of swerves into easy listening. It's horrible. No self-respecting person of any kind would be listening to that out of their boombox on the subway platform. But no, they're not happy to see her. They don't want to be her shelter.
Like you said, she goes to the only people around, and they don't want her around.
No, she didn't ask.
It seems as if they're going to rape her. They mentioned that could happen, and so she runs again. She's running as the train arrives, and they're chasing her, kind of. It looks like they're running on a treadmill. One guy's really swinging his arms, and nobody runs like that.
Only in the movies, you know.
Or cartoons. They do that in cartoons, too.
So she bumps into a subway cop as she gets on, and she sits down, and she's safe for the moment. But as the camera's panning around, we see a blonde woman in sunglasses standing between the subway cars, despite the sign reading, riding between cars is prohibited.
We saw her get on, too.
Yeah.
She's trying to tell the cop that these guys are after her, and he's like, I don't see anybody. So while they're looking in one direction, the woman gets on from the other direction, and we see behind them.
Boy, I think she just appeared.
Well, I know, but he made a point of making us watch that.
Yeah, you know, he does that a lot, the idea of you seeing stuff that certain characters do not see. We'll get into that later.
I mean, that's pretty common in movies.
Well, I mean, it's Hitchcock's way of doing suspense.
Yeah.
And De Palma's
we always have to
acolyte of that.
We always have to be more in the know than the characters in the movie.
So at the next stop, the subway cop gets off the train, and then we see that the gang from earlier is on the train as well, and they start to make their way toward Liz.
Yeah, they seem pretty threatening. So she starts running. She's running from car to car, but unfortunately she goes just a little too far. She gets to in between two cars, and then the woman is there.
As the gang kind of grimaces in horror.
They're like, oh, real danger.
The woman has her razor and is ready to attack Liz. And the gang is still staring as Peter shows up out of nowhere and sprays a white substance into the woman's face. And
that sounds worse than... I mean, having seen the movie, I know, but yes,
it's
he does spray
foam.
white.
It's like shaving cream.
You guys watching it, was it your first time, both of you? watching this movie?
Yeah, well, we watched it more than once for the podcast.
But it was your initial time, was your first time. Did you think she was going to die in that moment before he showed up? Since
no,
the movie had already taken one supposed potential lead out in 30 minutes.
There's only one other blonde woman left in the movie, and she's the killer. So no, I didn't think so. So later, Liz and Peter are having a slumber party. They're rehashing what just happened. Liz is in her jammies and she's having a drink. And Peter's trying to explain PhD level stuff to her like sodium. Peter says that he saw the blonde woman exiting Elliott's office and he followed her. And that's why he just coincidentally happened to be in the right place at the right time. We didn't see him getting on the subway. So he did save one little thing for our surprise.
Yeah, so there's the suspense aspect and then there's the surprise aspect. So
that would never happen in real life, though. He'd be on the wrong train.
So Peter says that he has pictures of this woman and he wants to break into Dr. Elliott's office and get the appointment book to get a list of possible suspect names. But Liz thinks this sounds more like a job for the police, and she does convince him to wait until after she's had a chance to speak with Marino.
But if that doesn't work, she will help him. But Peter doesn't want her to mention his name to the cops because that'll get him in deep trap with his stepdad.
The next day in Marino's office, Liz is telling him what she knows and that this woman tried to kill her last night. And there's a witness, but she can't say who because she had promised Peter that she wouldn't say anything because he was supposed to be studying for a French exam. Marino says there's nothing really he can do, but suggests without condoning that a murder suspect might try to break into Dr. Elliott's office if it was going to prove her innocence.
Yeah, and if she doesn't want to get arrested tomorrow because 24 of those 48 hours are up, she ought to do that. Now Elliott goes to visit the Metropolitan Psychiatric Hospital to talk to Dr. Levy. Elliott tells Levy that Bobbi has been threatening him because he won't approve that sex change operation. He says that his razor is gone and that one of his patients was slashed to death, he thinks, with that razor. Dr. Levy wants to talk to Bobbi, and then if he agrees with that diagnosis that Bobbi is the one who is the killer, he'll go to the police. And Elliott asks Levy to call him after he speaks with Bobbi. We see Peter there's these things called photomats, or you used to take your film to get it developed by somebody else. Then you had to wait. I think they got it down to an hour at one point, but sometimes you have to wait a whole day to get your photos back. So he gets his photos back, and he and Liz go through every frame that he's snapped, and eventually they do see that the woman in black was coming out of Elliott's office.
It's Super 8 film, so I didn't do it in 1980, but when I got that stuff developed in 90, it took at least a week.
Wow.
But it was also not in common use at that time, so maybe they did have a faster turnaround time in 1980.
It's New York. It's the big city, they got some...
Maybe he gave some money,
He had $4.
Here's an extra $4 if you can get it to me before this movie's over.
You could save a woman's life.
So that's evening, and Liz must have made an appointment with Dr. Elliott because she's seeing him.
As a patient.
It's storming outside, and Peter is watching from across the street with binoculars, and Liz starts telling Dr. Elliott about this dream she had.
She's making it up.
And doing a wonderful job. Celia.
Yes, she's attacked by a man with a razor and a bulge in his pants. What could that be?
Conversation starts to turn a little seductive, maybe.
Yeah.
And Dr. Elliott looks at his reflection in the mirror on his desk. Liz asks if she could take off her coat. Dr. Elliott says, of course, and she does so. And she came prepared because she's not wearing much beneath that coat.
Well, she has a skirt and top on, but then she...
Not for long.
Not for long, no. Then she takes off the skirt and asks, should I take off the rest? All this time she's been talking about her naughty, erotic dreams, and she mentions she's a hooker, so she knows from naughty.
And yeah, we as the audience obviously know her career, so we know that she's just playing this up for the cause, but she's good at it. She's good at playing it up for the cause.
She's in her bra, panties, garters, hose. She's got the full seductive lingerie set. She poses on his desk for a while, obviously getting the goods out there, seeing if there's any takers. And then she says she's going to go powder her nose. And when she comes back, that she hopes that his clothes are next to hers on the floor.
Otherwise, they can just get back to the mindfuck.
It's a great line.
Yeah, that is actually a good line. She's not powdering her nose, though.
No, the other room that she goes into is Dr. Elliott's office, and she starts looking for the appointment book. And she's looking everywhere except for the top left drawer, which is where everybody keeps all their important things. And she should have gone there first because that's where she finds it.
But there's no suspense in that. Peter's outside trying to keep tabs on the situation, but it's really rainy, and also he's very clumsy. He falls face first into the mud.
Yeah.
He's trying to get a closer view because his glasses are all...
Well, he does see Dr. Elliott start to undress.
We see him start to undress too because he looks in the mirror. He gives this kind of wicked grin, and then he starts sliding off his tie. That's while she's in the office doing the search. But anyway, Peter is outside. He can only partially see. And so he knows that something interesting is happening. He gets closer to the window. He falls. When he gets back up, there's not much he can do. She can't hear him or anything.
But by now she has found that appointment book, and she looks and notices that the final entry is Chris Clemens. So having found the information that she was looking for, or so she thinks, she heads back out into the other room to deal with Elliott however she has to.
But meanwhile, outside, Peter has been knocked aside by a blonde woman. We don't know any more than that.
They're struggling, and Liz notices that there's a commotion outside the front door and starts to investigate that. And we see the blonde woman with the sunglasses is also inside the apartment, coming behind her, raising a razor.
She's just gazing sort of dreamily at Peter out the window.
Where could she have come from, you guys?
I don't know. But Liz has no clue that anything's happening behind her, despite the fact that Peter's pounding on the window like, look behind you. She's like mouth agape.
So the blonde woman outside with Peter pushes him out of the way and then shoots the blonde woman inside the apartment. Liz looks down and sees that the blonde woman was actually Dr. Elliott in a wig.
Oh my God, really? Do you think people are really surprised at this point, Aaron?
No, but especially if you get the Psycho remix vibe that's going on. But even when you know the destination, it's the journey that's fun, and sometimes even knowing the twist, it kind of goes back to that suspense thing of knowing who it is or knowing kind of where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But just going, what are you thinking? Why don't you see it? You know, how can you not figure this out kind of thing? So you guys, did you see it coming from a mile away as well? And
we kind of knew the story, so it was ruined for us.
Yeah.
Plus, the very first time we see Bobbi, it's obviously a man, but it just looks like a man in drag. It's Michael Caine. You can't really femme him up that much, I think. So it wouldn't surprise me. Also, Elliott's first name is Robert and the killer is Bobbi. So there's that connection.
So now we're back at Precinct 13 and Marino is there to explain everything that just happened.
Yes, it's the denouement.
And Dr. Levy is there as well. And he's going to explain transsexuality to them and us.
Well, first Marino tells us that police person, he makes that his emphasis, Betty Luce was asked to follow Liz because though Marino acted like he didn't believe she was innocent, he did. And so he had some protection for her while he had her do all the detective work that he wasn't going to do. He only gave her one cop to protect her, though. That seems a little...
It's New York in the scummy days. They're busy chasing down other maniacs.
Nobody else was ready to stop her from being killed by a mad murderer.
So Dr. Levy explains that when Dr. Elliott had come to meet him, that was the first time that he had met Bobbi's male persona. And in Elliott telling Levy that he thought that Bobbi had killed someone, Levy realized that this was Elliott confessing himself as a murderer. So then he called Marino, but Marino was at a football game with his kids and didn't get the call in time to prevent Liz from going to Elliott's place.
The reason given for Bobbi being a killer is because I guess it's more of a split personality thing going on here, because it seems like he's explaining that Robert's masculine side and Bobbi's feminine side were basically of equal power, with the masculine side having just a little bit more power because the masculine side was able to block the surgery to keep Bobbi from expressing herself fully all the time. And so in doing that, that led to Bobbi resorting to murder, and that would happen every time Robert became aroused. He was aroused by Kate, he was aroused by Liz, and that made him murderous. It was a way for the feminine side, Bobbi, to kill off what was arousing the masculine side, Robert. He didn't use as many words as I just did, but that's what Levy said.
They do use a lot of words, and I've always thought it was interesting that he included this in there, because one of the things that people sometimes complain about Psychos when they do at the end explain, which it was 1960, they kind of needed that then. But some people complain that like that scene is too much. If you remember Psycho, when the doctor, same thing, explaining in the aftermath, and De Palma was like, yeah, I'll do that scene too, basically,
And that's where Psycho ends.
Yeah.
But this movie still has a little bit to go. So it just kind of circles back to the beginning and starts over in a way. The scene ends with Liz asking what's going to happen to Dr. Elliott now, which is followed by an awkward silence. And then we cut to Liz having dinner with Peter, or it's after dinner because there isn't any food on the table. She has a drink. He has nothing. And she's explaining a sex change operation.
Yeah, she's
more explaining. Yeah.
Oh, in explicit detail. And the funniest thing, I think the thing I liked most about this movie, in the background, there's a woman at her table and she's overhearing what's going on. And her face just gets more grossed out every second. And it made me think of the scene from When Harry Met Sally, but she's saying, I won't have what she's having.
Yeah. And it's going back to that split diopter shot. They're using that there too. So that's why those people are in focus while talking, you know. And at first it seems a little odd because you're kind of like, why can we see the background people? Because that's an odd occurrence in a film to have the background people so in focus. But as it goes on, it becomes kind of darkly humorous as they're like, what are these two people over here talking about? Kind of a thing.
Nobody else can hear it but her.
Yeah.
Then Liz says that Elliott's been taken to a psychiatric hospital. She says Bellevue, but it's the same one that we saw, I think, when Elliott went to visit Dr. Levy. I could be wrong. And Liz says that if Elliott ever gets any better, there will be a trial and she'll be the star witness. Peter is then sorry that they're not going to be able to work together anymore, but he says his stepdad is out of town and if she wants to come hang at his place.
I mean, you got to give the kid credit for, shooting his shot there, you know.
Well, she says yes.
Yeah, she says she could use a vacation and he's going to get the check.
I'd hang out with Nancy Allen anytime as a 17-year-old or whatever Peter is in this.
So now I guess we're at Bellevue or the
Bedlam, what it looks like.
Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
And this is where Robert/Bobbi is now a resident patient. We follow a nurse down a hallway where there are men in straitjackets just wandering around the hall.
Gibbering, and
she goes into a room at the end of the hall, and this room is filled with beds, and there's a light by each bed that's glowing like a star.
Yeah, copious amounts of the star filter use here. It's kind of purposely dreamlike, the lighting, not just the star filter, but the darkness. It's a very atmospheric scene, very different from what we've seen for the rest of the movie up to this point, and as far as the visual language goes.
So she's going from bed to bed and just making sure the patients are fine. And Dr. Elliott is in a bed and he's kind of falling out of it. His legs are
on the floor.
And so she pulls his feet onto the bed and he reaches up and strangles her, much to the delight of the other patients who are watching from in the room and from above. And
they get really excited once he starts undressing her. It just occurred to me that she looks like she bought her nurse's uniform at Spirit Halloween. Because it looks like the slutty nurse costume.
She knew this was going to happen because she wore her best lingerie.
Yeah, garters. So now we're in the perspective of a heavy breather approaching Peter's house. And conveniently, Liz is about to take a shower. Whoever is stalking the house breaks a window. And we see Liz get in the shower. It's one of those erotic but inefficient showers. Someone's approaching there. We see the doorknob twisting. And the intruder we see from the legs down wearing hose and sensible nurse shoes. Liz thinks she hears something, but she really doesn't do anything. But she does turn off the water. And that's when she spots we just see the legs, but they're black trench coat over the whatever the uniform is.
Liz gets out of the shower, presumably to find something to defend herself with. And we see that the shoes in the hallway are now empty. They're still there, but there's nobody in them. And the reflection reveals that Bobbi is in the bathroom with Liz. She comes up behind her, slashes Liz's throat. Liz somehow screams through this and wakes up in bed still screaming.
Oh, it was all a dream.
It was a dream.
Peter's there comforting her. So
he's trying. She's pushing him away in her little fit there, but he tries again and we fade into the credits.
The end. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where this week we are talking about Dressed to Kill from 1980, and I'm here with Jeff and Aaron Hudson. In 1979, AIP was sold to Filmways for $30 million and became a subsidiary production unit of that company, which was renamed Filmway Pictures in 1980. Dressed to Kill was the first film released solely under the new Filmways banner, but also the last AIP-produced film until its resurrection in 2020 by MGM. And the reason we chose this movie is because on our first American International Podcast, we chose AIP's first movie, which was The Fast and the Furious. And now a year later for our anniversary, we're choosing AIP's last produced film, Dressed to Kill.
Should also mention that this episode is being released on the week of the 70th anniversary of the formation of American International Pictures as the American Releasing Corporation.
This film was a test of Arkoff's skill as an independent producer, a skill that he really didn't have. Arkoff had already sold his interest in the company by the time Filmways began to flounder, which was around 1982. The company made from the merger of AIP and Filmways was later sold to Orion Pictures, which went under a few years later. This reportedly broke Arkoff's heart, and he called it the biggest mistake I ever made.
The film is credited as a Samuel Z. Arkoff presentation of a George Litto production of a Brian De Palma film.
So wordy.
De Palma and Litto had previously worked together in the film Obsession, and Arkoff considered De Palma a known quantity, having worked with him on the production of Sisters in 1972.
The budget for this movie was $6.5 million. Arkoff was looking to tempt De Palma and Litto away from another production unit, so he offered him $6 million for the film, as long as De Palma and Litto agreed to pay half the cost of any overrun. And they did. It cost them $250,000.
Arkoff was pleased with the way the film turned out, saying in his autobiography that it was a truly brilliant film, full of unexpected plot twists and more thrills and heart-stopping moments than the roller coaster at Coney Island.
Would you agree with that, Aaron?
That it has more thrills than the cyclone at Coney Island? It's a roller coaster movie, yeah. Yeah, I'll go with that.
In terms of casting, De Palma originally wanted Liv Ullmann to play Kate Miller, but she didn't want to because of the violence. But do you think it would have been a different movie with her? She's more of a icier, colder, more reserved character.
Would it be different? Yeah, but I don't know how different. De Palma always liked to cast against type.
Yeah.
He felt that helped layered characters, like, you ever watch Blowout, the John Travolta character was casting against what was his type up to that point, but that helps.
He's a sweat hog.
It helps layer the character because that's always kind of there behind it. Same thing with Angie Dickinson. I mean, she was just on a very popular TV show, policewoman for several years. So this was her going back to the big screen party with hey, let's show your breasts and let you be a little bit loose and get killed within 30 minutes.
Well, other casting choices that weren't made include Jill Clayburgh, who was his second choice. She was unavailable. And then Angie Dickinson turned out to be the third choice. But Sean Connery was offered the role of Robert Elliott and was enthusiastic about it, but he had previous commitments. He later worked with De Palma on The Untouchables in 1987.
And won an Oscar for his performance in The Untouchables. So,
but can you imagine him as a transsexual murderer?
I mean, now that's a different movie. Sean Connery going down that path. That's a different movie.
I just would like to hear it in the accent.
Oh, yeah. Bobbi.
Well, that's the thing. Bobbi didn't have Michael Caine's accent because I think that would have been too big a giveaway early on.
Yeah, she'd been English.
And most of the shots aren't Michael Caine in, the blonde wig either. He only wears it that one time at the end, but that also helps not give it away.
So in the Kate Miller shower scene, a body double was used. When the movie first came out, the producers encouraged the then 48-year-old Dickinson to claim the body was hers. However, it soon came out that it was actually 1977 Penthouse Pet of the Year model Victoria Lynn Johnson who volunteered to not take a credit as Angie Dickinson's body double for the shower scene. Johnson, a redhead, had to dye her pubic hair blonde so she could effectively double for Dickinson in the shower scene.
Good for her.
And also, let's throw it out there that this sequence was a big inspiration for De Palma to do Body Double a few years later. Just the whole, not controversy about it, but, there was a lot of discussions about it, and it just kind of gave him, have you guys watched Body Double?
No.
Well, you should. It's not
years
AIP.
Ago.
Yeah, you see, I saw it when it was new.
I may have seen it, but it's so far gone that
it's one of my favorite De Palmas personally. I like his horny Hitchcock kind of flicks, anyways. But there's a body double aspect to that movie, hence the name Body Double. And there's a shower scene even with a body double and such. But it's kind of partially inspired by the whole Angie Dickinson bit.
So in other casting could have beens, original producer Ray Stark, who was one of the people that De Palma and Litto almost went with, thought of casting Suzanne Summers as Liz. He thought that she would be a great, sassy, resourceful call girl, but Brian De Palma rejected the ideas because he specifically wrote the character for his wife, Nancy Allen. Sean Connery Suzanne Summers.
It's a different, when you bring in Sean Connery into it, you definitely have a different movie.
I just can't even imagine.
Certainly Suzanne Summers.
Dressed to Kill was shot primarily in New York City, though the gallery scene was filmed at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. The film was shot between October 1979 and January 1980. De Palma had referred to the elevator killing as the best murder scene he had ever done.
Would you agree with that? I mean, obviously it's his opinion, probably matters more than ours, but...
I mean, in 1980, this is before some of his best. Maybe it's a great Psycho homage. I don't know if it's his best, but it's a great set piece. I love the subway set piece too, though. I know that's not a murder scene, but he obviously has a thing for trains because he's returned to them a few times, or train stations.
There's nothing Freudian about that. So one of the things that we do when we research our AIP movies is try to get a hold of their press books. It's what they would give theater owners.
Yeah. I collect those. So.
Oh, yeah. They can go for a pretty penny.
They can.
And we found one for Dressed to Kill, and it was mostly just blurbs about the cast. So in the movie's press book, Angie Dickinson is described as a plain housewife suffering from sexual fantasies.
Suffering.
That was pretty hilarious. Oh my gosh, it's so awful.
How dare she?
Get some help. So in Dressed to Kill, that was contrasting to her much more glamorous role as Pepper Anderson, the title character in Policewoman. The press book also proclaimed that Nancy Allen was a lot more than just a director's wife, saying that she was a veteran of more than 100 television commercials, as well as several features, kind of underselling the women in this movie. But Sir Michael Caine's write-up, just Michael Caine at the time, was a bit less patronizing. He was asked about his hunt for a second home in New York City, because every actor needs to be there.
How many homes does this guy have? I just think of the Jaws the Revenge story where somebody tells them, like, that movie was horrible. And he's like, I haven't seen it, but I've seen the house it bought. So.
The tagline for Dressed to Kill is, Brian De Palma, master of the macabre, invites you to a showing of the latest fashion in murder.
So this film was originally rated X by the MPAA. Writer and director Brian De Palma fought the rating. He accused the MPAA of censorship and repression, while MPAA chairman Dr. Richard D. Hefner defended their actions as meeting obligations to American parents, who obviously would have taken their kids to this movie. De Palma reworked the film, though, editing it and getting it down to an R rating. Obviously improves the film's chances of financial success.
Yeah, X is the death of, especially then.
Dressed to Kill premiered in Los Angeles and New York City on July 25th, 1980. In 1982, this movie had its television broadcast premiere on NBC. During the broadcast, the following dialogue slipped past the censors and was aired to millions. Dr. Robert Elliott saying, "When was the last time you had intercourse with your wife, Lieutenant?" And Detective Marino replying, "Now what the fuck is it to you?"
I guess the kids got to see a little of that anyways. So upon its release, this film was controversial for being misogynistic, with its portrait of a frustrated housewife getting stalked and brutally murdered. The National Organization of Women organized a huge protest of this movie in 1980, but that had the effect of boosting ticket sales. So,
of course, controversy creates cash.
Don't think they complained too much.
De Palma is no stranger to labels of misogyny. I don't know if you guys had any discussions about this privately while watching it. That's been something labeled at him a lot.
But I don't see how this is any different from any other movie where women get killed by...
Well, he's always said that
it's a trope.
He believes women in peril are more interesting, not saying that he likes to see them and like get killed, but like he's more interested in women than men. And he likes to work with women. He likes to write for women. As you mentioned, he wrote the role for his then wife, Nancy Allen. He's more interested in the female characters than the male ones. I agree with him in a lot of ways as also a straight white male. But it also usually means that a woman at some point gets to have the comeuppance, whether it's like literally that in Carrie, or, obviously in this movie, it is a woman who not only discovers the truth, but there's a woman who shoots a different woman who shoots our villain
right
in this movie,
Kate does get punished for her sexual transgression by getting first VD and then killed. So I can see where they can.
And those are, and those are storytelling red herrings too, though, because we think this is going to be our lead. He's doing a psycho, obviously, but we think this is going to be our lead character. We think it's important that she has this sin of cheating on her husband is maybe going to have other repercussions, and it does, just not what we think.
But the same thing happens in Friday the 13th movie.
It does. So. And the male characters in these movies, like Dressed to Kill, they're the predators. They're aggressive. It's not like he's, making them out to be heroes.
Mm-mm.
They're the villains of the story. The women kind of always hold all the cards at the end of the day.
I think there's also a strong admiration for women in these films. I think of like the beginning of Carrie, the beginning of Dressed to Kill. It's both a shower scene, a slow shower scene.
Dreamy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there's
It's
any
not
other.
about showering in it ever either.
Of course not. Though Carrie is the greatest movie of all time about female hygiene.
Samuel Arkoff was invited to a panel discussion held by a group called Women in Film, who were among those who protested the violence against women in film. Arkoff, again in his autobiography, said that when it was his turn to speak, he pointed out that the damsel in distress trope was a thing well before there were even movies, and said that most film violence was actually perpetrated against men, adding, "We never made a picture at AIP that portrayed the rape and mutilation of women. In Poe pictures, only men were subjected to the instruments of torture."
I had to laugh at that one because we watched Wild Angels. There's a terrible rape scene in that movie. So I don't know who he's thinking of.
There's 900 AIP movies. You're bound to forget one, I guess, or just also, maybe
We haven't
twist
even
the truth a little bit.
We haven't even seen the worst of it. We have like Last House on the Left or Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane.
And like Last House on the Left is another one where what happens, the bad that happens to the female character lets you as the audience be more willing to go along with when she gets her comeuppance. But that's a whole different discussion with like rape revenge movies and such.
And imagine you forgot about Rape Squad / Act of Vengeance. And,
I know, I just thought of one off the top of my head, but there's
and you mentioned the slasher phenomenon, which was going full on going in 1980.
Mm-hmm. Halloween.
Between 1978 and 84, that's considered the golden age of slasher, Halloween to the first Nightmare on Elm Street. There's a lot of slasher movies made in that period. And there's something like 1,250 or so deaths that happen in those movies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's more done to males than females.
We don't have a final boy phenomenon.
No. Who's always on top at the end? That's a way to say it, Aaron, but that's
well,
you know where I was going, yeah.
The one who didn't have sex. Co-star Angie Dickinson defended the picture, though. She said that people should experience reality at the movies. In this case, what violence is really like, not something cleaned up. But I don't know if violence is that stylish.
Yeah, it's a very stylish realism there, Angie, but I love Angie Dickinson, so she can say whatever she wants. She's still a doll, still alive, man.
The film grossed $3,416,000 in its opening weekend from 591 theaters and improved its gross the following weekend with $3,640,000 from 596 theaters. It grossed a total of $31.9 million at the U.S. box office and was the 21st highest grossing film of 1980.
I think it was one of AIP's most successful movies.
It's too bad it wasn't AIP. It was Filmways by then.
Right. They didn't get to cash in. And then we talk about reviews that were contemporary to the times. Dressed to Kill mostly received favorable reviews. Critic David Denby of New York Magazine proclaimed it the first great American movie of the 80s. Gary Arnold of the Washington Post wrote, "This elegant new murder thriller promises to revive the lagging summer box office and enhance De Palma's reputation as the most exciting and distinctive manipulator of suspense since Alfred Hitchcock."
There's that name again.
Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times awarded the film 3 stars on a 4, stating, "The museum sequence is brilliant," and adding, "Dressed to Kill is an exercise in style, not narrative. It would rather look and feel like a thriller than make sense, but De Palma has so much fun with the conventions of the thriller that we forgive him and go along."
Gene Siskel of Chicago Tribune also gave it 3 stars out of 4, writing that there were scenes that are as exciting and as stylish as any ever put on film. Unfortunately, a good chunk of the film is a whodunit, and its mystery is so easy to solve that we merely end up watching the film's visual pyrotechnics at a distance, never getting all that involved. So I guess that was 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert.
2 kind of weary thumbs up, it feels like. Like they liked it, but
well, you've always got to complain about you can't
they always
just
complain about something.
Unabashedly love something. You have to
It's
pick
interesting because the movie Brats, which is named for their film school mostly. It's Coppola, it's Spielberg, it's De Palma, it's Scorsese, it's George Lucas, and John Milius. That's the movie Brats, and all of them, except for De Palma, really got wanked off by critics. Critics love these guys. And they always like to call out De Palma for being too stylistic or too much of a student of Hitchcock. And I wonder if these same critics who would always call that out on movies like Obsession and Sisters and Dress to Kill and Blowout. If they lived to today in the era of like the J.J. Abrams style of remixing, the nostalgia pandering that has been so prevalent in especially American filmmaking over the last 15 years, compared to what I consider the art of the De Palma movie, would they be so harsh on being like, oh, he's just doing Hitchcock remixes? It's like, yeah, he's doing what a lot of the stuff Hitchcock did, but he's taking it further because he can in one way because the ratings board is gone. It's different. It's the Hays Code is gone. The ratings board is here. And so you can get by with a lot more. And he's taking it further than Hitchcock would have ever been allowed to. And I also, we talked about the split diopter shot and the split screen editing. These are things I think of with De Palma that I never think of with Hitchcock because he didn't do them. So I think a lot of the critics were a little harsher on De Palma in those late 70s and early 80s, his kind of horny Hitchcock heyday, than I think was fair. But that's my opinion.
Angie Dickinson won the Saturn Award for Best Actress for her performance. Nancy Allen received a Golden Globe Award nomination for New Star of the Year, but was nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actress in the Razzies inaugural year, for which Caine and De Palma were also nominees.
She also got nominated for the Stinkers Bad Actress or Bad Movie Award or something like that. It was kind of like the Raspberries.
They didn't take off the way
they didn't take off the way the Raspberries.
In a July 1989 Hollywood Reporter article, James Ulmer reported that De Palma and producer George Litto sued Orion Pictures for $12 million. They sued for inequitable accounting of the film. In addition to claims that Orion failed to correctly calculate and dispense the filmmaker's 50% net profit share, the filmmaker's attorney alleged that Orion packaged Dress to Kill to sell with other low-grade features like The Name of the Game is Kill and Food of the Gods, which we talked about on an earlier podcast. And they didn't give Dress to Kill their fair share of the profits because the value of De Palma's film added to the package more than the other films did. But in November of 1989, Daily Variety noted that the suit was resolved with an amicable settlement of an undisclosed amount. I think that was fair.
They got paid something. That's what that tells me.
Dress to Kill shouldn't get the same residuals as Food of the Gods because they didn't do as well at the box office.
One of them's on Criterion and one of them isn't.
But it could be one day. You don't know.
This being the swan song of American International Pictures, there are a couple of cast members who had appeared in previous films released by AIP. Michael Caine, as Dr. Robert Elliott, had appeared previously in Kidnapped in 1971 and The Destructors in 1974.
Anneka Di Lorenzo, who was the sexy nurse at the end, was in Rape Squad, a.k.a. Act of Vengeance in 1974.
And Mary Davenport, as the woman in the restaurant, appeared in Brian De Palma's Sisters in 1972.
As did William Finley, who was the voice of Bobbi on The Answering Machine. He didn't get a credit for this, but he was in Sisters. He wasn't just a voice there either, was he?
No, he was very prominent in Sisters.
Okay. So in 1972, I did see Sisters, but it's been a while, so I don't remember him in it.
He's the Phantom of the Paradise.
In the Phantom of the Paradise. All right, Aaron, so now is the time when we say what we thought of the movie. And our scale is based on the letters AIP, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic. But for you, I'm going to change it so that A is more than fine, I is fine, and P is less than fine.
Would you like to go first, or want to hear what we have to say first?
Well, why don't you guys go ahead and I'll chime in.
We'll say what we have to say, what we think of the movie, and then we'll let you wrap it up because I have a feeling that it'll end on a happier note that way. Jeff?
So as I mentioned, the reason we chose to take a look at Dress to Kill this week is because as the unofficial swan song of American International Pictures, it seemed a good opportunity, given that the week this episode drops will be the 70th anniversary of the formation of American Releasing Corporation, which would go on to become American International Pictures. It also marks the 1-year anniversary of this podcast.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Having watched a few interviews with Sam Arkoff, Dress to Kill seems to be a film of which he was particularly proud. He had left AIP by the time of its release, and indeed the film was released by Filmways. By this time, American International Pictures had been completely merged into that company, and I can understand why Arkoff might have felt how he did about Dress to Kill. After years of producing exploitative schlock, Dress to Kill is a picture that looks and feels classy despite its exploitative content. And as we've discussed in a previous episode of the podcast, AIP's previous attempt to produce a quote-unquote prestige picture resulted in the hiring of Vincente Minnelli to direct A Matter of Time, and you'll have to go back and visit episode 22 to find out about that disaster. But back to Dressed to Kill. It's a difficult film to critique in 2024. Some of the themes presented that may have seemed shocking and confusing in 1980 are better understood today. But some of that confusion may be in part because of the way it was presented. Would it be easier for an audience to digest the idea of transsexuality if it were coupled with split personality disorder? The film doesn't go into that exactly, but it does describe a lot of things very matter-of-factly. So after presenting the aspect of split personality disorder as a side effect of transsexuality rather than it being a one-off occurrence, I feel that if a filmmaker is going to exploit something like this, it is also the filmmaker's responsibility to explain and define this. But that might be my 2024 perspective. And in 1980, it probably wouldn't have been controversial to say that he/she is crazy. I was only 8 years old when Dressed to Kill was released, and it came out a month after The Empire Strikes Back, so that's where my head would have been at the time.
That's where De Palma's editor was, too. All Hirsch.
But story aside, what Dressed to Kill really has going for it is its style. It's the De Palma style with split screens, and people tend to take notice of that because it's not typical editing to see split screens in a film, unless there's a phone conversation going on or something similar. Personally, I think this is kind of cheating. A good editor would find a way to convey that all of the action is happening at the same time without resorting to a split screen. You have something to say?
Split screen, obviously it's a different technique. It requires not just visual information in the scene, but literal counterpoint happening. It's a very hard thing to block out. It's a very hard thing to make it work convincingly and also stay interesting. So especially since he often knew he was going to be using split screen, I mean, it was like a do or die thing because like he framed it knowing it was going to be split screen a lot of times. So there'd be boom mics and crew members. It's not like he could just go back and be like, oh, we don't use it. Like Carrie was supposed to have a lot more split screen in that third act and it just wasn't working and they found other ways to get around it. Is it a cheat? Yeah, but any film technique is a cheat. Does he use it as a crutch? Some might argue that, but he doesn't use it in every movie. He knows how to do counterpoint editing from this point to this point and going back and forth. I think it's an interesting thing that he does. He obviously has a fascination with it, not just with literal split screen, but like with the split diopter and, you know, the way he blocks out scenes. He's got a different language to how he's conveying information.
Well, I think it stands out because we talked in an earlier episode about Wild in the Streets, and that one had some interesting editing choices as well. And it was nominated for an Oscar for editing. And I think it's just because it was so different, because the average audience member is not going to notice editing.
It's the invisible art.
If it's something unusual, like a split screen, it stands out. And so people tend to remember that. I don't think it was necessary to employ a split screen whenever Kate Miller remembered where she had misplaced an item of clothing. But the most effective use of split screen here is the long scene with Robert in his home and Liz in hers that ends with them both watching Donahue. And the scene is necessary in order to convey information to the audience. I don't think the characters themselves are in need of this information. I don't have any notes about the acting per se. It's all fine. I may have felt there were a few clunky line readings from Nancy Allen, but it wasn't enough to take me out of the movie. Dressed to Kill takes its beats from Psycho, and then it starts all over again when Psycho runs out of beats to copy. So we end with an extra shower scene and a pointless, tacked-on dream sequence ending. I think that the film were trimmed of some of this self-indulgent fluff, or perhaps if I had the luxury of seeing it without knowing the twist ending, I might be able to give it an A, but as it stands, I'm going to give this one an intermediate I. What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
I really expected to like this movie because I knew it was Hitchcock-esque, an homage, a copycat, whatever you want to call it, of the movies of a director whose films I very much enjoy. I thought this would be more similar in tone and execution. I think it captured very well the stylishness of Hitchcock's films. We have an icy blonde in tailored clothing. She's pitted against an intriguing man of dubious character, although it actually was an intriguing woman of dubious character. But I thought Dressed to Kill lacked real suspense, which is something that I would expect from a student of Hitchcock. Perhaps the plot twist that comes as the killer is revealed is telegraphed way too early. Perhaps in 1980, audiences weren't expecting a transsexual character, and they might have been surprised to find out the killer was Michael Caine in drag. Now, like you said, that may not have been his intention, but that's what I was wondering when I was watching it. I felt a little let down to find out that the only thing we learned in the reveal is that there was a lady cop who tailed Liz dressed in the same black trench coat that Bobbi wore, coincidentally. I also felt cheated by the shower scenes that bookend the film. Both are dream sequences. Both offer a lot of gratuitous nudity that it didn't have to be there. It was very stylish, but It wasn't really necessary, and it doesn't advance the plot, but you can say it's kind of Hitchcock-esque. But I didn't hate the movie. I did appreciate they gave Liz a lot more spunk than Kate had. Kate was very passive and decisive and underdeveloped, I thought. I would have liked to know more about her, but she only had a short time in this movie. When it switched over to Liz, we found a character who had gumption. She was willing to actively pursue the person trying to kill her. She did have help with nerdy Peter, but she was basically in charge of the operation. And De Palma does reverse the Madonna whore trope by punishing the virtuous housewife for her sole sexual indiscretion. She gets a VD and then she gets murdered. But Liz, the call girl, has several sexual transactions, but survives to the end of the film after helping to bring down the killer. So I appreciated that. I always like movies with a strong woman where it's not, oh, here's a strong woman, but you actually see her earning that designation.
Yeah.
The general tone of the movie kind of bothered me. I would have liked some like witty banter, more clever dialogue, fast-paced action scenes, and then have that tension that would often rise but kind of lead nowhere. I wanted it to kind of lead to a more shattering climax, like the Mount Rushmore scene in North by Northwest, and it gets pretty scary up there on top of the mountain. I just didn't feel that same thing here. To be even more on the nose, the scene in Psycho when we realize that Norman Bates has been dressing up as his mother to commit murder, it just seemed like there was a lot more of a reveal there, a lot more of a release of tension. I already mentioned the Psycho shower scene compared to this murder scene and how I felt it was different, but yeah, I can appreciate the similarities there too. But I think it seemed less frightening to me because Kate just kind of stands there and takes it. And it just kind of took me out wondering, does she duck or cover her face or try to get out of the elevator or something? But I don't know. That's just me. And I just thought the scene of her reaching up to Liz before she dies was just a little too overdramatic, a little melodrama even. So I think for me, this is a case of mismanaged expectations. I was hoping for a movie with more substance than style, but what I got was really the reverse. So the next time I watch a De Palma movie, I might expect something different than what I did for this one. And I'm giving this one an eye as well. All right, Aaron, tell us why we're wrong.
The eyes have, I mean, you're certainly not wrong because that's, everyone's different.
Your
and
perspective.
First I'll say hype and expectation kills more movies than actual bad filmmaking.
Yeah.
One of the joys of being a fan of exploitation and B movies and what a lot of cinemaphiles would look at as lower grade schlock is there is not a lot of expectation. You're just there to have a good time and watch a movie that maybe didn't have the money behind it but had the heart. Watching a De Palma movie, there's a certain expectation because he has had a long career and there's certain kind of filmmaking techniques that you kind of expect. And I wasn't disappointed when I saw Dressed to Kill. I knew it was a Psycho riff, but I still really enjoyed the ride. I like that, you talked about the manipulation a little bit in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
De Palma's obviously a very manipulative filmmaker. Once again, he's a student of the master of manipulation, Hitchcock. But I always appreciate that almost never, because I've seen Femme Fatale. If you've ever seen that movie, it flips off its audience pretty badly in the last act. If you think this flips you off, that movie is like a double Stone Cold Steve Austin middle finger at you. Most of De Palma's movies manipulate with ever offending me, and I mean that from the sense of like, like this was the reveal or the dream sequence.
How dare you?
That never really bothers me. I just enjoy the ride that I go on with his movies. I went through a reappraisal of his movies some years back. I think I don't know if we were recording yet, but I have some friends who've always kind of trashed De Palma. Always looked at him as, low grade Hitchcock ripoff, kind of like I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And they were always like, oh yeah, I'm just not into De Palma, and I'd always get in arguments with them because I'm like, I don't know, his movies, I go in for the ride and I go in for if you go in for the ride and you just let yourself go along with it, I have a really good time. And when I went through a reappraisal of his work, because I wanted to kind of like dig in deeper than like the box office hits. Because, Carrie was a hit, and obviously Mission Impossible and The Untouchables and such. I was like that Dave Chappelle meme. Like I need another De Palma fix because like his movies
all
are
over your nose.
Yeah. I was getting a hit from these movies, and because I'm a big Hitchcock fan, and these movies are like getting more Hitchcock in a way. You're getting a trashier Hitchcock, which I like. De Palma, comes from kind of that B-movie exploitation background, and you feel that in his work. And so is Dressed to Kill my favorite of his? No, it's not. It's probably not even my top 5 if I put together a list. Is it an A for me on your guys' scale? Yeah. Yeah, it's an A for me. Maybe not like a concrete A like Blowout, or I'm a big fan of like Body Double, which I know some people aren't. Body Double's wild to me. I love that movie. Carrie's obviously one of the greatest, horror movies of all time in a lot of people's opinion, and they're not wrong in my opinion. But I would give this an A personally. It has the set pieces I want in it. It has that manipulation of geography to set you up and then, put you on the ride. And did I see it coming? Yeah, I saw it coming, but I that's okay. You can see it swing coming and it can still hit hard. So
I will say that the 9-minute sequence in the museum, it's long. It feels long as it's happening, but it doesn't feel like 9 minutes.
No.
I don't know how long the shopping cart sequence in Tu Vas Bien is, but that seems long.
Well, and it's like, you mentioned North by Northwest, which is one of my favorite Hitchcock flicks. It has that sequence which leads to the crop dusting. Mm-hmm. There's that whole setup to that where he's just standing out there in the middle of nowhere. He's waiting. People come up, a bus comes by, this truck comes by, whatever, all these things are happening and just nothing's really happening. But it's several minutes of just nothing. Mm-hmm. And it's that same kind of concept in a museum. And I don't know if you guys read up this, but like that whole sequence kind of came from De Palma remembering in college, going to museums and trying to pick up girls there because similar interest in art and all that. And he's like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if that kind of sequence happened here?
Well, one thing I read that I couldn't confirm, so I didn't include it, was that De Palma's mother at one point asked him to tail his father with a camera to find out if he was cheating. And that was also an inspiration for the movie. I've heard that as well, which anyone who saw Spielberg's therapy movie, The Fabelmans, some of these directors might have had some parents who got up to their own adventures. I heard that one as well. I like the movie, but I like this era of De Palma. Like I call it the horny Hitchcock era, and I'm a big fan. Well, we'll have to check some more out. Well, thank you very much, Aaron, for being on our show. Where can people find That Movie Is Fine, the podcast? Well, we're everywhere that you can find a podcast, including Overlords here, Pop Culture Entertainment Network. You guys have been so gracious to us to include us under your banner. Well, we knew you were perfect for the job. But we're on iTunes and Spotify and all those places. We just dropped an episode that talks a little bit about De Palma in this era because we're talking about erotic thrillers. They'll have to check that out. But yeah, you can check that out. The Instagram is That Movie Is Fine podcast, I think. I don't think it says the podcast. I think it's just podcast. TMIF. Or maybe it's, I don't know. That's the Twitter, the X. Yeah, the X is like TMIF pod, I think is what that is. You can find me on the Instagram as Hudson Frohawk. And I'm out there doing my thing. Awesome. Well, be sure to check that out. And for the American International Podcast, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot. And I'm Jeff Markin. And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.